A happy Sunday to you, Scott Baker.
Sunday, October 5th, 2025. This is the edition of Lead Better. And today is field note number 1578. And the title is The Reciprocity of Liking and Team Cohesion. So
Yeah, probably the most
goal here being team cohesion, but liking is the key to get there.
Yes. And a little bit of a jumble of words there, right?
Yes,
probably
right. You were confused?
A little bit. I was just in placing where the modifier should be, right?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Because I've never heard the reciprocity of liking in a phrase like this, but I don't know if there's a study specifically. But there is research behind this. I've just never heard of it before.
Yeah, Mikey, come on. There's always a study, right? There's always research. The question is, can you rely on it? That's the thing. You always have to take. And I like studies as much as the next person, but especially in the social sciences, right? You always see these things come out. They say, well, but it couldn't be duplicated. I was like, well, wasn't it peer reviewed? How did we get through this?
Right.
And so it's good to take a study, and then it's good to say, does this make sense in the world? Does this kind of map to how I have experienced the way that reality unfolds in front of me?
Right. And so the simple, hit yourself over the phrase kind of result is knowing that someone likes you increases your chances of liking them as well.
Yes, correct.
Okay, someone did a study on that, and yeah, apparently somebody did.
Sure, yeah.
And those are the results, right? And it seems like it would be common sense, but for a lot of folks, maybe it's not natural to be able to take that.
Yeah.
But
well, that's why
you can use it.
Well, sure. And that's why there's the two parts to this field note, which is one, there is an interesting thing to explore. What is the nature of why we like people? Why do people like us? If you took that all the way back through the philosophers, back to ancient Greece, what did they think about liking? Now, how that works in reciprocity and what that does and means for a team and team cohesion, because whether you're coaching the high school football team or whether you've got your group together and obviously friend groups come together because you kind of like each other, you hope, except the person you don't like, and then you just gossip about that person. But,
right.
In the middle of all of this, any leader should be thinking, well, wait a minute, I tend to work better with people I like. And if I fostered an environment that sort of made liking, sort of electric, maybe my team would be better. Now, I don't think that the goal would be like, I just have to get more productivity from the team. Can I force them to like each other? Right. You actually have to believe that liking people is a good in and of itself, I think.
Yes. But some of the suggestions on then how to do this, how to get the team to like each other, are the type of things that you would think need to happen anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a more difficult one when we think about making sure that you're doing it out of earnestness, right? How do you make yourself care if the team likes each other from a real reason instead of like a manipulative reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
What you're doing is, setting up team activities, setting up opportunities for people to like each other better. I don't know that people will get suspect of that to the point of like, oh, this isn't going to work on me. This kind of feels like the type of thing that's going to work no matter what.
Yeah. Well, I would look at it this way, which is leaders and those in the superstructure of an organization, they certainly set the tone. If I don't think you guys like each other, right, well, then it's going to filter down. It's kind of like if mom and dad are fighting, then nobody in the family is happy, right? So you have to have kind of a sense about, well, what's my general attitude about people, right? And then you have to look at this and say, are we building into the culture things that are not peripheral to the actual productivity of the workforce? But think about it. We know that liking just in general, and there's been lots of studies around this, really comes out of time, right? There was a couple of years ago, some research about it takes 50 hours of time that you spend with somebody before you really consider them a friend. And then really it takes 200 hours of sort of ongoing exposure and depth before you really consider somebody to be a very good friend. Right. So imagine this when you map it onto where we are now. Does that count if you're on Zoom? I guess it does to some degree.
Right.
But when you're in team meetings, you're not spending a lot of that other time. We even were talking about this in our firm today. It is still an ongoing issue in many of the major corporations that we are involved in, about like what's the split of work from home and when are you in the office and all the rest of that. Well, you would know that if you have a remote team, you have extra work to do to get them to actually be able to spend time, because it's not only the time of likability, it's the time of trust. And it's that exposure around that gives you the feeling of, I really actually know this person beyond the words that they happen to say in the meeting. And then over that time, I can decide who do I gravitate toward. But we now are kind of in a situation where I think we're building in things that are really problematic in terms of fostering not just likability, but just human connection in general.
Right. So it makes me think of like all the different personalities that you have on your team in order to ascend. If you've got a high performing team, might you recruit someone who has this natural skill set in building friendships, simply to build cohesion on the team, even if they don't necessarily aren't top performers in any other area that makes you successful? They're the team builder, right? Maybe it's worth it to be able to think about having someone who's extremely likable on that team just for that reason.
Well, I think so. And again, I think that it does. And there's a point here that probably is important to make, which is this idea of likability doesn't mean that you, the leader, have to be like, Joe extrovert, right? There's not that necessarily is not the connection that we're looking for here. You can express as a leader, even if you're an introvert, a quiet person, someone who's not, you're not big at networking parties and glad handing. It's the expression of interest in other people. And if you as a leader are expressing interest, this is in the Shackleton Diaries and on that, sort of well-known voyage, that he was always spending time with everybody, asking about family and kids and interests, and seemed to make no division between, the lowest people on the totem pole and those who were, in the upper echelon. You as a leader need to be expressing that too. Right? Now, I think that there's all kinds of characteristics that we can do tonally. There was a comedian, I can't remember his name, and he always just comes across really well. And I heard him in an interview, and he said that whenever he meets somebody, whether he's never seen them before, like in a convenience store, or whether he's known them, he has this image in his mind that if he were stuck in a well and somebody peered over the top and said, "Hey, you're there and I'm going to get you out," how would you react facially if you saw that person? You'd be like, I am so glad to see you. Right? And he just has built that into his character, that whenever he encounters somebody, he's going to have this countenance that says, I am so glad to see you. And sure enough, you just see how it radiates from him. And you think, well, we could all get a little bit better at that. And wouldn't that, if we were the leader and we're really glad to see the people in the office, wouldn't that start to be a little bit contagious?
No, that's fun. I'm going to give that behavior to my son, because when he's on the cruise boat, he's boat famous, right? Everybody on the boat knows who he is. And he probably goes through that same thing where he's like, I don't remember if I've met this person or not, because
absolutely
I've met thousands of people. And so how do I behave in such a way that gives them you're not trying to fool the person, but you do want to give them the impression that you're excited to see them, whether you remember them or not. Right?
Yeah. Right.
And so is that disingenuous though in any way to do that? Like, I'm trying to
No,
figure out
I don't think so. I was a local news anchor for a long time. You're local mini famous, right? In a way. And there, because it's not like, because you might have run into this person on the boat before, but you don't know is this a neighbor that is saying hi to me in the grocery store, or somebody from my kid's school that I should know, And so you have to kind of have that sort of way of saying, I'm just going to assume that we know each other, right? And I'm gonna look happy to see you and happy to say hi, and that way you don't have to say good to meet you. Like, you just say good to see you, right? Those are all ways of just being kind of like, how's it going today, right? And you can always take the initiative. Well, what's the downside there? I do think that there is there's a wonderful thing that happens in this cohesion. But just when we think about people in general, we sometimes are just dulled down by the routine of life that we become sort of oblivious to the fact that it's sort of miraculous that we encounter other human beings at all, right? And I heard somebody joke one time that, like, if you thought of the schlubbiest person that maybe that uncle who just has just been like the bane of the family and just seems like just to sit in the chair and doesn't have anything productive. If we encountered that person on another planet, it would be headlines for years. Like, we'd be like, we found this guy named Joe on this planet. And we'd be like so fascinated with Joe because we're like, how in the world did Joe come to exist? Well, Joe is actually just as fascinating because he's sitting on the lazy boy. But we don't actually think about it. Joe doesn't even think about himself that way. So we need to be, I think, little igniters of magnetism. And it's not going to work with everybody. You don't have to kind of make sure that you're like always friends with everybody. But I think you can have a little bit of energy to the interactions that we have. What's the worst that's going to happen? Because we know what the best is going to happen. Better cohesive teams. They like each other. They like playing together. They like working together. And in the end, they're going to be more productive together.
Right. No. Okay. So, what do you think is the first thing? What's, if we recognize our team doesn't really like each other that much, is the first thing that you're going to do, pinpoint one person who might have the tendency to exhibit these behaviors, and the two of you, kind of say, let's display these together so that we can, increase the amount of liking together? Is it just as simple of saying we're going to greet each other in the hallway more and ask each other about each other's, nights last night? Or
I think it can be that. Now, the field note does make the point that particularly in the workplace, there's a degree of caution, right? People are like, they are gauging motives.
Sure.
And, and I know
whether they know they're doing it or not, they're gauging motive.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then you also create cultures where there is, what we sometimes call I've heard in admired leadership, where there is there's sort of a false collegiality, right? Yeah. It's not an honest culture. In the truth and harmony, it's like, we're all harmony here. We're not telling each other the truth. So I know somebody who was the chief communications officer of a major organization here in Pittsburgh that has a global, presence. And that was his description of the C-suite, which was, they were like, it's so good to see you. It's such a wonderful time. And everybody, it's all kumbaya. And then as soon as they're out of the board meeting and down the hall, it is backstab city. It is just a mess and a nightmare. And you're like, okay, well, that's how it is. Now, what's interesting is I've been in other cultures. I remember being on an international trip. I won't be too specific. It's probably 10 or 15 years ago. And this was a really cutting edge tech team. And they were just yelling at each other all day long. And I was like, should I go back to the hotel? Right. And they're like, what do you mean? And they're like, seems like you guys are, and they're like, no. And I was like, oh, this is just how they talk all the time. They actually really, really like each other. They're just very intense about how they have their discussions in that country. And I was like, oh, well, okay, that makes sense. So it just took a little while to get it. So I think that you have to kind of analyze, you need to model as a leader. We're not talking, I think you can be high harmony and high truth. I think you can kind of blend, those elements, and you need to be able to express that. But that, again, is going to take time. I just talked to somebody the other day, and they were telling me about somebody major in their organization. And that they brought in, and a major academic institution. This person has a very pivotal position, came in, and this person has been in the job for a year, makes an enormous amount of money, really does about a day of work a week, mostly does it from home. Priority is family, right? Most of the faculty hasn't even met them, has been here a year, hasn't even met them, right? So there's no way that you as a leader can actually express that you like those people or that you expect them to like each other if you're not modeling that. It's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, actually. All right. Well, good. This is a fun one. It is, yeah. In the rest of the day, like, what are the actual behaviors that actually make that happen? right?
Well, and I do think that that's the great thing, which is in admired leadership. We have a lot of great behaviors around building relationships and building trust and all of those things, which I think are incredibly important. But just having the thing when you say, oh, it's about liking each other, not a trivial field note. Right.
No,
It is.
no.
It can be a personally transforming, culture transforming, team transforming thing to think about.
Yeah. But it's not like if you were to ask the question, okay, what are the things that I could do that make you think that I like you? Like there'll be this judgment in that question. It's like, what do you mean you don't normally like me? It's like, no, I just want to
Right.
understand what is the thing that you might like me, right?
Yeah. Interest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, and it really just goes. I mean, if you want the fast course, just go back to Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Just
Right.
be interested in what where they from, what's their favorite place to be, what kind of pivotal experiences have they had. All of these things are the things that make that up.
Right. Right. Okay, great. Thanks very much. This is a good one.
Dynamite.
All right. Have a good
Thanks,
day.
Mikey.
Bye now.
Hmm. Would you like me to end it?